This meeting is being live streamed.
All right, now we are online. Happy Wednesday, everyone. Welcome to Water Wednesday. And this webinar today, we have our special guest, the Florida-friendly landscaping agent from Marion County, Amanda Merrick, joining us, talk about lawn management during drought. So I'm Yiling Zhuang. I'm the Water Resources Regional Specialized Agent in Central District. So it's a primary Central Florida and the North Central Florida. As you follow our Facebook or follow us on Facebook and Twitter, you see we have this Water Wednesday webinar since 2020. And this topic actually is the first time we touch on that, especially during current situation. It's like we are receiving very minimum rainfall. And yesterday, Amanda even mentioned she's getting all these phone calls about their grass with all kind of issues. So hopefully this timely topic can give you some ideas how to manage your lawn. So without overdue, let's just get today's webinar started. So first of all, I want to show you this animation. I'm not sure if the time it should be moving. All right, now it's moving. So this map is from US Drought Monitor. So I have the time frame is for this year. So from January until now. So you can see how this drought situation across the whole nation and especially how it's developed in Florida. So now it's in March. If you look at here, we start to see a little bit of yellow. So that means just very minimum dry, but over time, like as time goes by in April, it's sort of the beginning when we start to see the drought. So April 16th, 23rd, we start to see more and more area in the drought period. And to May 14th, we are already moving to moderate drought. Now it's a severe drought. And of course, the situation is across the nation. And now let's take a closer look at Florida. So as I mentioned, it's like beginning of April, we start to enter the drought. So I picked the time frame, it's April 9th, actually, for the Central Florida and the North Central, basically the whole Florida, especially a little bit in the West Panhandle is entering a little bit drought. But overall, it's quite normal. But fast forward to now, June 4th, and most of Florida actually is under the drought situation. If you see this like dark orange, it's severe drought. And it's a light orange, it's moderate drought. And the yellow, it's just it's a little bit dry, not too bad. But again, the whole South Florida and the Central Florida is under drought situation. And some people may ask, is that normal? Is that like usually during May and June, it's dry? So I also pull out some data just to show you, let's do a comparison. Let's look at 2023 and 2024. Is that really normal? Like it's that dry? What I find is really interesting. It's that's June 6, 2023. Yes, we still have drought, but it's just the region actually, it's just the Tampa Bay region and a little bit beyond the Tampa Bay region. It's not like now almost cover the whole like Central to South Florida. And also want to show you, since we are mentioning drought, it's like how dry are we? Like what does that really mean? So that's the data from Florida Animated Weather Network. So I pick a station in Central Florida, actually where I'm based in Apopka. So it just shows you from April to now, how much rainfall we are getting. So you look at the whole 2-month period, a little bit over 2 months. It's more like 2.5. We got 5.43 inches. You look at the number itself, it may not look that low, but you think Florida actually we get 40 inches of rain annually. So you divide it by each month, it's already every month is about 4 to 5 inches. And during raining season, actually we get more rain, but for the 2.5 months period, we are getting close to 5.5. And if you look at these dates, actually most dates, we didn't get any rainfall. So the question is, if we are not getting rainfall, then how do we manage our lawn? How much water do we need? Like, do we need to irrigate? That's the first question. And then the second question is like, how much water do we, if we do, how much water do we need to put on our lawn? With this question in mind, I will invite our special guest, Amanda, just to give you some insights how to manage your lawn during this drought period.
Great, thank you, Yelin. So yeah, we'll go ahead. Let me go ahead and hit the PowerPoint so you guys can see that. You guys see it okay?
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. So yeah, great resources, and it's ironic that the week that we present, South Florida is getting inundated with rain, which is much needed, as we just saw. I'm here in Marion County, and we're hot, we're dry. We were hoping for that rain that just hasn't really come yet. Ocala got a bit, but not to the degree that we need. So my name is Amanda Merrick. I'm here in the Marion County Extension Office in Ocala. If any of y'all are residents of Marion County and you have lawn, palm, landscaping questions, want to know how to conserve water, attract wildlife, that's what I'm here for. But today we're going to specifically look at those questions that Yelin just brought up. Do I need to irrigate, and what do I do with my lawn when it looks like this, okay? Right now, these are pictures that I took by our office just yesterday, and everything is really hot and really, really dry right now. So what can we do about it? Well, as she mentioned, we do have dry seasons. So yeah, Florida has seasons. We have winter, we have fall, but really what's more applicable to us is wet season and dry season. Usually winter for us is on the drier side, so between October and then early June, it is typical for us to be dry. This is our dry season. Now, usually end of June, right around the first day of summer, that is when we start really getting into our rainy season. So to answer your question, is this normal? Yes, it is, but here's the thing. The temperatures are not. Usually this time of the year, 80s, low 90s, we've had record high heat. I think it was just 2-3 days ago, multiple cities in the state broke temperature records. So, I mean, you can see just an extreme heat, and you can feel it when you go outside. There's that hot, dry heat. Yes, ma'am.
Amanda, sorry to interrupt you, but I don't think your screen is in the presentation mode.
Oh, let me try to change that. There we go. Does that look better?
Yes, now we can see it. Awesome.
All right,
Thank
perfect.
you.
You're not a problem. So if you didn't see it before, this is our drought season with, October to early June, roughly about 3 inches of rain a month, which really isn't much. And then hopefully soon towards the end of the month, we'll start getting into those rainy seasons. But like I had just said, this is the problem, is the record high heat combined with the drought. Our dry season, that's when we're really under a lot of stress. When the weeds are wilting, we know we're under drought stress. So with Florida Friendly Landscaping, this is my program area. It is housed out of the University of Florida, and the Florida Friendly Landscaping program is really designed to promote diverse, attractive, low maintenance landscapes that conserve water, protect water quality, and provide habitat for wildlife. So just so you have a synopsis of what our program is all about and how you can apply it to your lawn. Florida Friendly Landscaping has 9 principles, and for how to manage your lawn and your landscaping during drought, really those first 2 principles can really be useful. So number 1, right plant, right place. And then of course, number 2, watering efficiently, which we'll dive into. So starting with right plant, right place. So selecting plants best suited for your site. So the climate we had mentioned, that has been the big issue, and our zones really are warming. I remember growing up in Marion County as a child, we were half 8B, 9A. I remember winters that would get down into the 10 degrees. We don't see that anymore, okay? So we were all zone 9A, and then recently, as of last year, our zones have again warmed and moved up. So we're now primarily 9B. So things are definitely warmer than what we may be accustomed to. And the plants are feeling it as well. So you'll see certain plants, The flowering dogwood comes to mind. You'll see certain plants that may have been okay in your landscape in the past, but due to climate change, drought conditions, etc., they may struggle. So selecting those plants that are best for your climate, your soil, your light, your moisture, space, and maintenance, all of those things really help play into what is going to survive in your yard, but also thrive with minimal input. As far as the turf grass goes, Bahia and centipede are the most drought tolerant Florida turf grasses that we have. Centipede is pictured on the top right here on your screen. Centipede is an excellent low maintenance grass that actually grows by runners. So it can be a thicker grass compared to Bahia, which is pictured on the bottom. It's easily identified by its V-shaped seed heads. And the good thing about both of these is they have viable seed, which means you get free grass, right? So all these seed heads, the black seeds, are when they are ripe, and that is a good time to mow and help disperse your free grass seed. For those of you who may not be from Florida, I'm sorry. The Kentucky bluegrass, the fescues, the ryegrasses, they're annuals here, unfortunately. And I've seen some beautiful yards in Ohio and Pennsylvania, and unfortunately, with our soil and our climate, they just don't do well here through the hot months. So enjoy those up north, but here in Florida, we have the warm season grasses. St. Augustine is still the most commonly used in landscaping, but of all of these that we have to pick from here in the state, Bahia and centipede by far are the most drought tolerant. Followed by, St. Augustine can be drought tolerant depending on the variety. Bermuda grass, Seashore paspalum, that's more on the coast, mild. And zoysia, similarly moderate drought tolerance, but nothing compared to Bahia or the centipede. Now, a big thing that I really want to emphasize to help y'all get through drought conditions: don't mow. Mowing your grass during a drought is incredibly detrimental to it. When you mow, your grass is losing even more water and can certainly stress it out. Now, when I say drought tolerant, both centipede and Bahia are the most drought tolerant. That means they will still turn brown, okay? They'll still go into dormancy, they'll still show stress, but one good rain and they green back up. St. Augustine, zoysia, Bermuda, they have a higher likelihood of not returning if drought continues. But one of the best things you can do is mow at the highest recommended height. Bahia actually likes it tall, around 3 to 4 inches. Centipede can tolerate it shorter, but honestly, having a mix of the two, like a mixed mowable lawn, which I'll talk about a little bit later on, you can always, keep the two mixed. It's perfectly fine, but I do recommend you stick with a higher rate. That 3 to 4 inches would be ideal. And of course, the irrigation, which we'll talk about here, but irrigating no more than 2 times a week. Okay, I'm going to repeat this later on, but given a drought, everyone is wanting to turn their irrigation on. No, you still are not allowed, according to water management districts, to irrigate more than 2 times a week, unless, of course, you have a new lawn. Okay, if it's less than a month old, there is an exemption, but everyone else, no more than twice a week. The mowing heights, if you don't have Bahia or centipede, here are the requirements or the recommendations from the University of Florida. St. Augustine is similar to Bahia. It likes it mowed high, so keep it around 4 inches. Again, I'm going to emphasize, if it's under drought stress, don't mow. That is the worst thing you can do for your grass. These mowing recommendations are all based on research to really encourage a thick, healthy root system. So the taller the grass, the longer the root system and the healthier it'll be. If you do have dwarf St. Augustine, like Captiva, which is chinch bug resistant, Seville or Delmar, those will need to be mowed a bit shorter. There's also a newer variety on the market called Citra Blue that is a semi-dwarf. It's very drought tolerant, has better shade tolerance. So if you are wanting to look for a St. Augustine that is more drought and shade tolerant, you could look at the Citra Blue varieties. Lawns mowed in drought cause even greater stress. And just like you and I, if you don't sleep well or don't eat well, you are more likely to get infection or get sick when you are under stress. Plants and turf grass are the same thing. This photo here was taken here by our office, and this is clearly mow stress. The grass, this is a Bahia sod. It was put down a few months ago, and you can actually see the strip where the mower missed is still green, whereas everything else is this uniform brown. So that's the last thing you want to do is mow when your grass is under that stress. Now, mixed mowable lawns. This is a concept that has really gained speed. It's really something that we've been promoting with the University of Florida, is trying to encourage yards that aren't just a monoculture. Monoculture meaning just one type of turf grass. And a great example of why that's a problem is, for example, St. Augustine grass. Chinch bugs are a major pest that have become very resistant to pesticides. So if all you have is St. Augustine and chinch bugs are in your area, well, they're going to have a feast. Whereas if you have a mixed mowable lawn, you have some Bahia mixed in there, some centipede, or even better yet, one of my absolute favorite ground covers, this is sunshine mimosa. This is a native flowering ground cover, and having those that mixed mowable lawns, some people will call this a weed. A weed is only a weed if you call it a weed, but having those mixed mowable lawns have tremendous benefits for pollinators. You can imagine all the pollinators that would love to visit this little flower. It looks like something from Dr. Seuss. But it also reduces, if not eliminates, the need for pesticides, fertilizers, and irrigation. Some ground covers, such as sunshine mimosa, are legumes. They actually add nitrogen to the soil to help feed your grass. And mixed mowable lawns are more resilient. They don't have the issues with the pests like we had talked about. They're more resilient to drought, to freeze, to just anything really. It's a more resilient lawn. And then you also have that seasonality. You'll have things that are blooming different years or different seasons, and you'll have green cover different times of the year when the turf grass itself may be going dormant. This is a picture here of, this is an HOA community here in Ocala. This is all Bahia in their common area. And if you look closely, you'll see the flowers of the sunshine mimosa growing wild. So this is an excellent example of having a sustainable mixed mowable lawn. Fertilizers are not needed. Irrigation is not in this whole entire section. Actually, a little bit of browning up here, that's the zoysia, the lawns, unfortunately, that are struggling, whereas the Bahia in the back, with the mimosa, no irrigation, perfectly fine. And you can learn more about these mixed mowable lawns and species to look for in our IFAS blogs. This is one of my favorites. The time for mixed mowable species has come. In this blog, it also references one of my blogs as well that adds more information about some of the native flowering ground covers, which if I have time, I'll discuss a bit towards the end of this presentation. A great example of having Florida-friendly landscaping that is drought tolerant and the benefit of weeds, as you may or may not call them. This is a photo taken on Highway 40 here in Ocala just a couple of days ago. You can see the mowers have been through, the grass is brown, but here, where you might call them weeds, the alternative ground covers are still green, and the landscaping in these beds are mulched with pine, the crepe myrtles, the oleander, the native muley, the flax lily. They're perfectly fine. You're like, what's wrong with you, grass? Okay, so this is a very good demonstration of why having both mixed mowable lawns and landscape beds that are Florida friendly and don't need the irrigation can really be beneficial. Speaking of which, alternatives to turf. So one of the things that Florida Friendly Landscaping really does like to promote is reducing how much lawn you have. If your HOA allows it, or if you don't have a need for it, pets, children, if you want to go out and play soccer, obviously you're going to want a yard. That's absolutely, if it has a function, go for it. If you don't have a need for a lawn, or if you don't want it, having a mix of landscape beds instead with organic mulch, such as pine straw, melaleuca, or pine bark, really can help save a lot of water and add a lot of diversity and interesting color that is not only more attractive to you, but also to wildlife, particularly pollinators. That 2 to 3 inches of mulch really helps the ground covers and the plants survive drought. And I noticed that even on my own property, the beds that have been mulched, they seem fine, but my beds that are not mulched, I'm watering every single night, trying to keep those poor little new guys alive. Now, the ones that are established, yeah, they're wilt, but they'll be okay. It's the newly planted plants that haven't gotten established yet that I'm most worried about. That 2 to 3 inches of mulch really helps buffer those soil temperatures and keep moisture around the roots, therefore helps reduce some of that stress that they may be feeling from the drought. Of all of these that are best for weed suppression, pine straw is actually the best at weed suppression, followed by pine bark and then melaleuca, which is an invasive tree we use as mulch. Here's a great example of why we really are trying to promote the use of landscape beds instead of turf grass. This is based on research done at the University of Florida campus. Going from 1,000 square feet of turf grass to 1,000 square feet of landscape beds instead, one person, 1 yard can conserve over 15,000 gallons of water every single year. And that really adds up. The photo here is actually of a yard that we certified as being Florida friendly here in Ocala. They reduced, I know according to the HOA requirements, they took out a big chunk of their zoysia and put in a lovely mix of Florida friendly landscaping instead. Once those plants are established, they really will not need the irrigation. And that means a lot of water saved. So with Right Plant, Right Place, we do recommend you visit our website, the Florida Friendly Landscaping website. Take a look at the FFL guide for plant selection and landscape design that has both design ideas, but also towards the back, plant recommendations based on what you want, including your zone. So remember our climate zone. I'm here in Marion County, so we're half 9A, the bottom half is 9B. Most of you, Central Florida, you're either 9B, even getting into 10A as we go further down, okay? But ironically, North Central Florida really doesn't exist anymore, okay? North of us, this whole area, you're all zone 9A now. So really the folks that are in 8, you're tiny little bit of group just up there on the panhandle. So we've definitely warmed. And the other thing too is really trying to reduce and avoid your use of invasive plants. This is an excellent resource to look into what plants are invasive. My favorite really is trying to emphasize native plants. And the Florida Association of Native Nurseries is an excellent resource to learn about plants native in your region, but also where to purchase them. Now getting into watering efficiently. Efficient watering really is the key to a healthy Florida landscape and to reduce that runoff. You may not realize that 60% of our fresh drinking water is used to irrigate lawns. It is an unbelievable statistic. And honestly, there's even some communities here in Marion County that are using 80 to 83% of their water for irrigation, which is an incredible amount, especially considering that the yards are not even entirely large. So efficient watering. So both with the mowing recommendations and irrigation, this is what it's all about, the root system. So if a grass is mowed at the highest height and it's not overwatered, you get a nice, deep, resilient root system. This is a resilient grass that won't die in a drought. Yes, it may go dormant like we see with the Bahia right now, but once the rain returns, it'll green right up, no problem. Whereas the grass on the left, mowed short, overwatered, short little root system, that may not survive a bad drought that prolongs. So only water as is needed. Water in the early morning, my recommendation is the best time is between 3 a.m. and 8 a.m. But your local utility may tell you what times you need to water, but really early morning is best. You don't want to be watering at night, 9, 10 o'clock at night, you can start to get some fungal issues, but certainly no watering in the middle of the day. Absolutely no watering is allowed between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. Almost all of that is going to be gone to either wind or evaporation. Never more than 2 times a week. I'm going to repeat that again. Always follow your water management district rules. So Marion County, we're half St. John's, half South Swiftmud or Southwest Florida. Those of you in other parts of the state, look up your local water management district rules and abide by them. But for us, it's never more than 2 times a week unless it is a new lawn with an exemption. Water thoroughly and infrequently. So I actually just did a class last night with a homeowner who was watering 5 times a week for 10 minutes. You're going to encourage a really short root system and possibly some fungal issues by doing that. So check and maintain your system regularly. Okay, that means it's not a set and forget it type of system. You got to run it. I tell folks, at least once a month. Turn your system on manually, walk around your yard and making sure there's no heads that are broken or misaligned or leaking. This is also really important, resetting your controller seasonally. So a lot of folks will set their system and completely forget about it, or they may not know how to run their system at all. Call your local extension service, or better yet, call the manufacturer. Many of them will help you learn how to run the controller. In the winter months, I know it's hard to think about winter right now, but in the winter, which is, November through February, it is critical that you reduce that watering. At least here in the Central Florida, water once every 2 weeks, okay? Skip a week. And again, no watering in the middle of the day. If you do have landscape beds, which we do recommend, make sure that irrigation that's watering the lawn is not overspraying onto your beds. And preferably you'd have drip system, okay? Or micro irrigation that just waters the roots of your plants, not that overhead spray that can cause some pest and disease issues. So calibrating your system. Now this is a fun one, all right? Your neighbors may think you're a little crazy, but it's a good learning opportunity. How do you know you're putting down a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch? That is your goal. So every time you run your system thoroughly and infrequently, your goal is to get 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch of water put down. That is getting that water down to a root system to encourage that nice, long, resilient root. Well, you can just put out cat food cans, tuna cans, as you see here, as long as the same size, flat-sided, put it out randomly in your zone, and you can leave them out overnight before your system runs and go out the following morning and see what depth you're at. I don't recommend doing what is pictured here. That is going to be a challenge to sit there and hold a cup or in the grass and hold the ruler. My recommendation really is to mark your cans beforehand with a ruler and permanent marker. That way you know how much water is going down. If you really want to get into it, you can actually buy irrigation calibration kits online, which is what's pictured here. These come with pre-calibrated funnels, which also makes it a little bit easier. Point being here is make sure you know how much is going down. If you don't want to do this, the general recommendation for those older systems, the high volume that put out big streams of water, usually between 20 to 30 minutes gets you that depth that you want. The newer high efficiency system that put out those streams, those fingers of water, it can take 45 to 60 minutes to get that depth that you need. But you really won't know until you do this catch can test. And then really water as needed. If you take a look at this plant, what do you think is wrong with it? First thing may come to mind is drought. All of my plants in my yard when I get home look like this, unfortunately. But this is a normal, natural response. Plants actually change their leaf orientation depending on the dry, the sun, the rainfall. So some plants, such as this azalea, they'll move their leaves down to avoid sunlight hitting the leaf surface. Some plants will move their leaves up, or some will actually fold in half, like your grass. Your grass blades will actually fold in half, all to reduce how much sunlight is hitting the surface of those leaves. It's a natural, healthy way for those plants to conserve water. Just like exercise is a stress for us, but it's good for us. Similarly with plants, a little bit of drought stress is healthy. Constantly overwatering, you're going to run into those root rot issues. Now here's the trick. If come, late that evening, early morning, and this plant is happy and perky again, it's fine. It doesn't need the water, okay? Middle of the afternoon, 2 o'clock, we're all looking like that, right? We're all feeling wilty and sad. But look at your plants, look at your lawn, late that evening or early the next morning. If it's open and happy and perky again, no water is needed. If they're still looking wilty and sad, it's telling you, please give me a drink, okay? Now, if they're still not responding to irrigation or rain, call your local extension because you may have an issue with root rot or some other pest. But for the drought purposes, let your lawn tell you and your plants tell you when they need the water. Don't immediately panic when you see the wilting. Now, one big reason we don't want to overwater, other than obviously conserving our natural resources, you can end up with some major fungal disease issues, okay? Root rot being the far worst. I see many yards with take all root rot, and believe me, it is not a fun one to battle. So overwatering, you get fungal issues, you do encourage more weeds, shallow root system. And one of those weeds actually that may be an indicator of an overwatered lawn is dollarweed. We see a lot of folks complaining about dollarweed, which is an aquatic plant, okay? If you've got a lot of water or poor drainage, which is my case in my yard, I have a lot of clay. I have an entire field of dollarweed. It happens to be edible. Doesn't taste that great, but still, if you've got dollarweed, it's a sign that you may have too much water, bad drainage, or possibly even a leak. You may have a spigot that is dripping water or an underground PVC pipe that may be busted that you may not be aware of. Water efficiently, avoid, and this is a great one, okay? Summer, when it's, middle of rainy season, pretty much this slide says don't really irrigate in summer. If it's rained in the past 24 hours or if rain is forecast for the next 48, you don't need a water, okay? So once we get into the rainy season, you can really shut your system off. It's best to just manually turn it on as needed. Now this little guy here, no, it has nothing to do with your cable. We get folks asking, I thought that had to do with my cable or my satellite. Nope, this is your rain shutoff device. That is required by law. If you have an irrigation system, you should have a working rain shutoff device. Working is the key word. Most of the time, after about 8 months, these don't work. These corks, they rot, they get algae, they get lizards, frogs, what have you, in these systems. They very rarely work. So again, don't set this and forget it and rely on it entirely. You're the best controller, so keep an eye on it. And with that, folks with automated irrigation systems use twice as much water as those that do not. And it's poor design, it's poor maintenance, and it's really that mindset of set, forget. The system's running at 3 a.m., you don't see it. Hopefully you're not up. So unfortunately that equates to a lot of water wasted. And here's a great example, okay? Geysers, no good. If you see geysers or folks watering when they shouldn't, you can report it to your local municipality, you can report it to your local HOA, or you can report it to your local water management district. It can be anonymous and it's really just education. You're not going to get people into trouble, but they will be educated. Hey, you may have a problem you didn't realize. And it'll educate and, alert a company or homeowner, hey, I'm overwatering, or hey, I might have a leak that I wasn't aware of. This picture on the right-hand side is a great example. Homeowners gone during the summer, came back to an astronomical water bill. They had 3 heads that were busted and were shooting water straight up into the eave of their attic. Major issue for mold, but also wasted water. But we were very concerned about the health and safety of this homeowner, given that they have no idea. They had no idea how long that water had been getting up into the attic. So make sure you regularly check it and fix it as needed. Speaking of which, it's an I Spy game. So this is a common issue I see with site visits. Poor irrigation design. Why landscape architects and developers insist on putting the irrigation heads behind the shrubs when they know full well they're going to grow. You end up with these irrigation heads that are either completely smothered or blocked by those plants that, well, they did what they're supposed to. They grew. So unfortunately, this plant that doesn't need the water is being pounded, whereas the grass on the other side that may need it is not getting it. The other issue too is poor design. You want to see head-to-head coverage, one irrigation head watering the next. And a lot of times that doesn't happen. And I do have a reference here in a minute of where to go to look for irrigation professionals that may be able to help you with your system. This is my contact information. We're not done yet. I got a little bit of time. I'm gonna go over some plant recommendations for y'all. But if you want to reach out to me here in Marion County, this is my information. Our best resource for being updated on programs and events is our Marion County Master Gardener Facebook page. But if you want to learn more about Florida-friendly landscaping, which I really encourage you to do, or anything horticulture related from UF, these are resources for you. Now, for those of you who want to have a more sustainable lawn, you want to get through this drought, you want to conserve water, these two resources are where we recommend folks go. Florida Water Star is a certification program. It is required in some counties for irrigation consultants, technicians to be Florida Water Star or FNGLA certified. Marion County is not one of them, but that doesn't mean you don't have access to these same folks. We also have a relatively new certification process through the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program, and you can be Florida Friendly certified. So if you are looking for especially irrigation help from a reputable company, I do encourage you to look at FNGLA accredited professionals. On this site, you will find FNGLA irrigation professionals as well as the Florida Water Star professionals. They've tied them all under one website. And for those wanting to do a more Florida-friendly yard, the Florida-friendly certified professionals can also be found on that website, okay? Now, as far as plants go, there's endless plants. There's no way I can possibly cover everything, but I do encourage you to go to our Florida Friendly Landscaping website where you can find our plant app, which is really cool. Let me go back. The plant app, you can actually filter based on your zone, if you're sun, if you're shade, if you want native, trees. So that app is really useful. And the publications that I mentioned, like the guide, you can see the digital version of the book, or you can also purchase it from our IFAS bookstore. That's IFAS, our bookstore, and look up the Florida Friendly Landscaping Guide. As far as the Florida-friendly plant options go that I want to highlight today that are drought tolerant, so reducing your lawn and putting those mulched beds instead, these are some of my absolute favorites. Walter's viburnum is a gorgeous shrub to small tree. Now this will be covered in white blooms early spring, okay? Honestly, even late winter. So this plant will be a great one for privacy, wonderful one for wildlife, because not only does it get that flower for pollinators, it'll also get a berry on it later in the year too. Mine are actually putting off little green berries now. So I'm super excited to see the wildlife, particularly the birds coming to it. If you don't have space for a 27-foot bush, I understand, you can look for the dwarf varieties. I actually purchased the densa, which is a little 3-foot one, covered in white blooms. So there's certainly some dwarf varieties that you can look for instead. This will want full to partial sun. Plumbagos are a really common planted one, and I apologize, I just noticed the picture looks funky there. So, well, you can see two pictures. So there's the traditional light blue plumbago, and there's also one called Alba that has white flowers. Do be aware these do get large. They're sprawling. Oftentimes one plant in a spot is all that you need because it can get 6 to 10 feet tall and wide. It can really sprawl and just do its thing naturally. You can prune it, but they don't look good pruned. It's best just to plant it in the space that it wants and let it do its thing. Coontie are an excellent native, you can call it sort of like a ground cover, but it's a small shrub, usually 3 feet tall and wide. It can get up to 5. We actually have a pretty old one here at our office. So if you're in the Marion County or Ocala area, you can always come by our office. The demonstration gardens are always open. You can see some of these plants, including the coontie, which are a prehistoric native plant. Sun or shade, they're excellent, and once they are established, are very drought tolerant, but you got to get them established first. I will say they do want a lot of water when they're newly planted. Now, we mentioned some of these flowering ground covers. We talked about the sunshine mimosa. There it is. This was growing in my parents' yard, and we planted a lot of it in our own yard, especially over our new drainage field. So sunshine mimosa is native, one plant can cover 100 square feet. It'll go, it'll sprawl, which is yay, it's free plant. Share with your friends. Frog fruit is another similarly native one. It likes it a little bit wetter than sunshine mimosa, but still very drought tolerant once it's established. And a middle one, this is not native, but it is Florida friendly, is the perennial peanut. We actually have about 10 acres right up the road from our office, and they planted perennial peanut all around their acreage, and it's a beautiful plant. Both sunshine mimosa and perennial peanut are legumes, which means they are adding nitrogen to the soil. And I learned today perennial peanut apparently is edible and tastes like peanut butter. So there you go. Dune sunflower, this is one of my absolute favorites. This is growing beautifully in the front. This is the picture of the front of our office here. So please come by and see us. You can see some of the blanket flower and amongst the dune sunflower. Now, believe it or not, this was only 3 plants. I had no idea beach sunflower, also called dune sunflower, can spread so much. So give it space. Now, you may have guessed from the name, it is native to our beaches. It is native to the sand dunes. So it likes sun, it likes sand, and it likes heat. So win-win in those drought conditions. Hollies, there's numerous hollies. I mean, you could spend an entire day just on hollies. But dwarf Yaupon holly, which is these guys, and the tree, this is also pictured here at our office. Both of these make an excellent naturally caffeinated tea. Beautiful evergreen trees. Another very common one are the dayhoons, the American holly, East Palatka holly. These are gorgeous trees that are readily used in landscapes. And one of the most commonly used for hedges are the Burford hollies. These have a pokey, waxy leaf, but they have those bright red berries. All of these, as long as it's the female, has the red berries for the birds. One of my favorites for pollinators is the bottlebrush tree, very drought tolerant. This one doesn't even skip a beat once it's established. These flowers are highly attractive to especially hummingbirds and butterflies and bees. The entire plant will be buzzing. They will not bother you. They are busy eating. They don't want anything to do with you. So leave the bees alone. But these plants, they can either be a tree, not the weeping, but the standard bottlebrush, or the dwarf. If you don't have room for a tree, you can get the better Johns, the little Johns, or one of the other dwarf varieties that usually stand at 3 to 5 foot range. And chase tree, this is one of my absolute favorite plants. Pollinators cannot get enough of it. We have some beautiful ones here that are full-size 20-foot tall trees. These can be kept as bushes. This is a younger one that we planted at the water treatment plant here in Ocala. Gorgeous plant. They are deciduous, which means they will lose their leaves, whereas the bottlebrush were evergreen. If you don't have space, there are dwarf varieties. There's even some new chased trees that have white blooms or even purple leaves called flipside. So this is a beautiful, both deer resistant and drought tolerant tree to large shrub. And grasses, we're going to wrap up with grasses and then just a few others and they'll be done. This one is absolutely gorgeous in the fall. This is a native muley grass. This is actually a new cultivar called White Cloud. So the purple muley is the true native, but if you want to add a bit of other color, the white cloud, which is pictured here, is gorgeous in mass in the fall. Muley grass is similarly native to the coast, to the beaches, loves the sand, heat, and the dry. Other natives that are smaller, but a gorgeous plant, especially the Elliott's lovegrass, has like a bluish tint to the leaves, and it'll get a white seed head, almost look like a flower in the fall. Those are both gorgeous, whereas purple lovegrass would have a purple seed head instead. So certainly don't discount the grasses that can really fill in a large area very cheaply. These are absolute winners as far as drought tolerance goes. Even the lemon coral sedum, which is pictured here, we used it in a demonstration garden in Ocala. Even as a newly planted plant, it says water once every 10 days, and it's not kidding. We actually accidentally killed some of our sedum in the nursery. We were overwatering them and they literally rotted in the pot. These don't want water. Very drought tolerant, and these are a lemon, like a lime green chartreuse color, looks like a succulent, and what you see here are actually the yellow blooms. It does get a flower on it. Society garlic, which is edible. Bulbine, this is African bulbine, comes in orange or yellow, very commonly planted, very drought tolerant. And then you can have some fun with agaves, century plants, or even the native yuccas, the native, it's yucca and Spanish bayonet is pictured here. Color guard, Adam's needle yucca is a gorgeous one. This is Spanish bayonet, and you can probably guess from the name, it's not friendly. It's very sharp. We actually used it when I worked for the Park Service to keep people out of the sand dunes. So the agaves, the yuccas, aloe is another one. These are all very common, readily available, very drought tolerant plants. And we'll wrap up with some of my favorite pollinator plants that are also very drought tolerant. The firebush, mine has been wilting, but it's fine. As soon as we start to get some rain, it comes back. But the pentas, the bottle brush, sweet almond smells amazing. The tuberosa milkweed, which is pictured here, this is the native milkweed. Tuberosa is much more drought tolerant, whereas the aquatic or swamp milkweed, if it was aquatic or swamp in the name, it means it likes it wet, okay? Asclepias tuberosa, the native butterfly weed as it's called, likes it hot and dry. And many different wildflowers, you know, the blanket flowers, the coreopsis. Florida Wildflower Foundation has some excellent resources, both information, but also where you can purchase native seeds too, okay? So that's pretty much it. I'll go back to my contact sheet where you can reach out to me. And if any of y'all have any questions, Yelin, I'll go ahead and open it up, but I appreciate y'all giving me the time to present to you today.
Thank you so much, Amanda. It's
You're
great.
welcome.
And I love the last few slides, just showing some pretty plants.
Yes.
So now if you have any questions, feel free to put in the chat box. And maybe also tell us what's your favorite plant. Like if you have anything Amanda just introduced. While you are typing, I do have one question here. So the question, actually, this is not the first time I heard this question. So earlier you mentioned the perennial peanuts. So how about the people with a peanut allergy? Will that be an issue?
Oh, that is a good question. I honestly don't know the answer to that. The perennial peanut is Arachis glabrata. I don't think it's related, but I don't want to say no, it's not a problem. So I would definitely, I'm going to say err on the safe side and probably no, but I'm not 100% certain on that. That's a very good question I need to look into. Let's see. Edible peanut. I'm going to look up to see what the species is for that.
That would be good. That
Yeah.
reminds me, one time I went to visit a LEED certified house, which they use a peanut shell as mulch.
Right.
So that was the time they also asked the question, then how about for peanut allergy?
Depending on the severity, yeah, depending on the severity, some folks have to eat the peanuts to have an issue. Others, they just have to be in the room to smell the dust. So that would be a major problem. But both the perennial peanut and the edible peanut are in the Arachis species. So I'd say err on the safe side and avoid perennial peanut if you do have peanut allergies. Good question.
All right, thank you. The other question is also about the ground cover. Earlier you mentioned the frog fruit and said it's a little bit has a little bit specific requirement for weather. Like, could you elaborate on that?
Oh, yeah. So the frog fruit loves it sunny, but it will tolerate wetter conditions, whereas sunshine mimosa really likes it really dry. So the frog fruit honestly prefers more medium moist conditions. It will tolerate drought once it's established. So that was just my one caveat. Sunshine mimosa, full sun, dry, it's happy. The frog fruit, you got to make sure it's established. Once it's established, it's been in the ground for a few months, it can really tolerate drought well, but it will, especially at the very beginning when it's a little bit on the wetter side. So good question. We did actually have a question here. Someone will be in Ocala this week, and absolutely you can walk around our demonstration gardens anytime. Our office is open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, but the demonstration gardens, you'll see both in front of our office and in the split rail fenced area. Those are always open. And most of the plants do have plant ID signage. So please feel free to come by and enjoy those.
Nice. I will drop the, oh, do I need to drop the address? Yes, I will put the address in the chat box.
I think it should be, is it on, do you see the screen there?
Oh, I see it now. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So, yep, so that's our
Perfect.
address. And yeah, if you guys are Marion County residents and you have a bad patch of lawn or a plant, you can certainly bring in samples, but please don't bring us anything dead. We cannot tell anything from a dead sample or 3 blades of grass or a single leaf. It's really, we need pictures. So if you can bring in pictures, but also bring us, patches of sod, including the roots, or a branch that's starting to show symptoms, but nothing dead. Once it's dead, there's nothing, we can tell you it's dead, but we can't tell you how it got to that point. So pictures are good, and good full samples of, parts of the lawn or the plant that's starting to show symptoms, please.
Great.
And if you aren't in Marion County, every county in the state has an extension service. So if you go on the Solutions for Your Life, this website here, if you go on Solutions for Your Life, you can actually find your local extension office if you aren't in Marion County.
And we have one more question here in the chat box. So we just moved here and the lawn is pretty bad. Can we just start putting plugs of frog, etc., in various places where it is a dead area?
Yeah, so you can, so depending on the grass, so Bahag centipede, you can put down seed, or you can always put down sod or plugs. Yes, I would say just make sure you are watering it regularly. Okay, the new seed will need to be watered every single day, twice a day. Sod is the same way. It's going to be want to water, twice a day, every day for the first couple of weeks to keep it moist. If the seed or the sod or plugs dry out, they will die. So I do typically tell folks, if you don't have an irrigation system, or if you're not prepared to haul the sprinkler out with the hose, you may want to wait until the start of the rainy season, which is usually towards the end of June. But you will want to make sure that you have a backup, like a hose and sprinkler system, to keep that sod or the new seed wet. Okay, good question.
Perfect. Let me check our Facebook one more time, see if I have any questions. All right, I don't see any questions here, and I don't see any questions from our Zoom platform. I think you addressed all their questions.
Great.
That's awesome.
Well, thank you for having me, and hopefully we'll get rain soon.
Yes, hope we enter the raining season soon, and I hope it's not too much. The
Yes.
forecast said that this year will be a very active hurricane season.
Yeah, hang in there for those of you in South Florida. I can see that you guys have been having some flooding issues now too. So good rain, not downpour rain, flooding rain.
Yeah, I feel like that's the major, the challenge for Florida. It's our rainfall event. It's not evenly distributed. We have the dry season, and we also have the wet season. And the wet season tend to have a lot of rain.
Very wet, but yeah, we need it. Thank
so just
you.
like you said, hope we have some good rain. And
Yes,
thank you
ma'am.
everyone for joining us
Bye.
today. Hope you enjoy the rest of your Wednesday afternoon.
Great. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you,
Bye.
Amanda. Thank you so much for this presentation. It's
You're very
awesome.
welcome. I appreciate it. Bye.
Bye.